Comrades and friends, my topic is repression in the workplace. Karl Marx ended his Communist Manifesto with the words, "The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Proletarians of all countries unite." That was in 1848. As Comrade Sarah mentioned, it was Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution, who revised this slogan to workers and oppressed peoples of the world unite, which dons the masthead of my favorite newspaper, Workers' World. No wonder there's a war against labor. In prosecutions against the January 20th, 2017 Inauguration Day protesters against bigot-in-chief Donald Trump, also called 45 by many in the labor movement in disgust. The government contends that some of the defendants' union membership qualifies as evidence of a conspiracy to commit a crime. That millions of protesters protested around the world against Trump's inauguration. For some of the defendants, the government invoked Washington, D.C.'s Riot Act, a law that was used against the demonstrators who protested following the assassination of Martin Luther King in 1968, after Dr. King went to Memphis to support the mostly African-American striking sanitation workers in the I Am a Man strike of AFSCME Local 1733. This law had actually not been used against protesters in Washington, D.C. for 50 years. The only common element among some of the protesters still facing charges was their union membership in International Workers of the World, IWW, whose members are commonly called Wobblies. The IWW organized units across the country called General Defense Committees, whose stated objectives are to promote, through organization, action, and outreach, a mass non-sectarian defense of workers. Project Veritas is known for recording liberals and leftists and unions undercover, then heavily editing the footage to manufacture a misleading image of the targets. This was used to infiltrate an IWW Disrupt J20 and General Defense Committee training session that had been announced. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Kirchhoff is alleging that the presence of widely practiced protest infrastructure could constitute evidence of a conspiracy to commit a riot, and that unions are the infrastructure on which an alleged conspiracy rests. Such an approach directly criminalizes union membership. Now, where have we heard that before? 50 years ago, after the great strike in Memphis of sanitation workers also struck in Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Charlotte, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Miami and St. Petersburg, Florida, and Corpus Christi, Texas. Prior to the Memphis strike, there was a strike of sanitation workers in New York City. When liberal Mayor John Lindsay appealed to Governor Nelson Rockefeller to call in the New York National Guard to break the strike, all the city unions, including DC 37 and New York City Central Labor Council, threatened a general strike in solidarity. The New York Times and Lindsay begged Rockefeller to call in the National Guard to break the strike. Rockefeller flinched, saying the National Guard was used to break a strike in which a family corporation was involved when I was a child. Men and women were killed. I will not use the National Guard. That's a direct quote. Rockefeller was referring to the 1914 Ludlow Massacre, when his grandfather, John D. Rockefeller, the owner of Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, got the Colorado governor to call in the National Guard to break a mine workers' strike. The miners and their families were huddled in tents when the militia opened fire and set fire to their encampment. Over 60 strikers and family murder members were shot, dead, or burned alive. 3 years later, Rockefeller did break a strike with blood. That was the strike of the precarious workers, the heroic Attica prisoners, who rose in rebellion, who had the demand of safe passage to a non-imperialist country and minimum wage rights for prisoners, which precarious workers like disabled workers and sex workers still don't get in this country. 3 years after the death of Karl Marx, an answer was given to repression in the workplace on the first May Day. On October 9, 1886, as a sentence of death by hanging was announced, August Spies, one of the defendants and a leader well-loved and respected, an inspiration to the laboring masses, spoke to the packed court. Looking up defiantly at hanging Judge Eldridge Gary, he said, "If you think by hanging us you can stamp out the labor movement, the movement from which the downtrodden masses, the millions who toil in want and misery, expect salvation, if this is your opinion, then hang us. Here you will tread upon a spark, but there and there, behind you and in front of you and everywhere, flames blaze up. It is a subterranean fire. You cannot put it out." Happy birthday, Karl Marx.